Most women never realize that something as simple as a hug can reveal far more to a man than the pronouncement she chooses or the way she presents herself. In those few seconds of physical closeness, her body may be communicating feelings she has never said aloud. And what is fascinating is that women who naturally create a powerful sense of connection through a hug are rarely using some clever technique. They are simply avoiding a few unconscious habits that many women repeat without noticing. Those tiny habits can quietly create distance before a man even understands why his feelings have shifted. Think about that, because most of us grew up hearing the same general advice: be confident, smile, relax, and be yourself. None of that is wrong, but very few people ever explain what a man physically experiences when a woman embraces him. What makes one hug feel warm, inviting, and memorable, while another leaves him feeling strangely disconnected? This is the part nobody teaches. Today on Relationship Truth, Matthew Hussey, we're going to explore 3 common ways women hug men that may unintentionally weaken attraction, even when the woman genuinely likes him. These are often intelligent, caring women with sincere feelings, yet their body language is sending a completely different signal. Then I'll show you a 4th type of hug that is rarely discussed. It's the kind of moment that can remain in his memory after the evening is finished, returning to his mind the following morning when nothing in particular is happening. Stay with me, because understanding that final difference may completely change the way you think about physical connection. After years of studying relationships and helping people understand attraction, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Men often remember the smallest physical moments far more deeply than women expect. Before we explore these mistakes, however, you need to understand the principle behind all of them. A man often feels a physical signal before he consciously interprets it. You may assume he is carefully evaluating the conversation, your humor, your personality, or everything you have in common. Those things absolutely matter. But when physical contact begins, his nervous system is already receiving information before his conscious thoughts organize it. Within the first few seconds of a hug, his body may already be sensing whether you feel comfortable around him, whether your presence feels warm, whether you genuinely want that closeness, or whether you're simply completing a polite social gesture. He usually isn't consciously asking himself these questions. The reaction happens underneath thought. Human beings naturally notice physical cues much faster than we can logically explain them, which means an embrace is never entirely meaningless. It communicates presence, it reveals comfort. It can suggest emotional openness or quiet hesitation without a single sentence being spoken. The difference between an embrace that makes someone feel closer and one that creates subtle distance may seem incredibly small, yet emotionally, it can have a surprisingly strong effect. Remember a time when someone hugged you and you instantly knew they were truly pleased to see. You probably didn't study the position of their arms or calculate how many seconds the embrace lasted. You simply felt the warmth. Now remember a quick, obligatory hug from someone whose attention seemed to be somewhere else. Again, nobody needed to explain it. Your body recognized the difference immediately. The same process happens for a man. He is not necessarily standing there judging your performance or mentally scoring your hug. His body is simply responding to the physical message it receives. And often, that message reaches him before his mind creates a story around it. This is why those brief seconds can matter so much. Physical connection has its own language, and unfortunately, most people were never consciously taught how that language works. If this perspective is already helping you see attraction differently, support Relationship Truth, Matthew Hussey, by liking this video. It helps this conversation reach more people who may need to understand these subtle relationship signals. Now let's look at the first mistake. I call it the back pat embrace. You've almost certainly experienced it, and there is a good chance you've done it yourself. You lean into a hug, wrap your arms around him, and suddenly your hand begins tapping his back. Pat, pat, pat. It happens automatically, almost as if your hand needs a task because you aren't sure where to place it. It may feel completely innocent to you, but consider the emotional message associated with that movement. We often pat someone's back when we're consoling them, reassuring a friend, or hugging a relative we haven't seen for a long time and don't feel especially close to anymore. It is friendly and socially acceptable, but it rarely communicates deep warmth or romantic closeness. So when you repeatedly tap a man's back during an embrace, his body may interpret the moment very differently from what you intended. The unconscious signal can feel like, we're keeping this safe, we're keeping some space between us. You may not be thinking that at all. Perhaps you're nervous because you genuinely like him. Maybe you suddenly became self-conscious and had no idea what to do with your hands. It could simply be a habit you've carried for years. The problem is that he has no access to the explanation happening inside your head. He can only experience the physical moment itself. I've heard men describe dates by saying, something just felt slightly off. I couldn't tell whether she was interested. When they're asked what created that impression, they often struggle to give a logical answer. Eventually, they say things like, she seemed tense, or it felt as though she wanted to move away before we were even close. This is how subtle body language works. The woman may have gone home thinking the evening was wonderful, while the man is questioning whether the attraction was mutual. The back pat hug can feel safe and completely ordinary from your perspective, but to him, it may unintentionally carry the emotional energy of distance. The second mistake is the disappearing hug, or what I call the rushed embrace. This is when physical contact lasts for barely a moment. Your bodies meet, and almost instantly you're stepping backward again. Sometimes the hug ends so quickly that he has hardly processed the closeness before it is already over. I understand why many women do this. You may be standing somewhere crowded. You might feel nervous. Perhaps you're worried that holding him for another second will make you appear overly uninterested or too eager. Maybe you're consciously trying to seem relaxed and independent. But the message he may receive is far simpler than the complicated reasoning happening in your mind. She didn't really want to hug me. His brain usually doesn't know. Stop to create a detailed list of explanations for why you moved away quickly. He experiences the moment and forms an emotional impression. Quick withdrawal can easily feel like limited interest. It happens so automatically that he may not even realize this is why his energy changes afterward. And here is what makes this mistake particularly unfortunate. Women often rush the hug precisely because they like the man. Attraction creates nervousness. Nervousness creates self-consciousness. Then self-consciousness tells you not to stay close for too long because you don't self-conscious. Know how strongly you're feeling the moment, so you pull away quickly, hoping to protect yourself from appearing too invested. Yet the physical signal he receives may communicate the exact opposite of your true feelings. Instead of reading your nervousness as attraction, he experiences your movement as rejection or emotional uncertainty. This is where so many potentially beautiful connections become confusing. Two people may genuinely like one another, while both are trying so hard to avoid looking vulnerable that neither receives a clear signal from the other. The woman thinks, I don't want to seem desperate. The man thinks, I guess she's not interested. Neither interpretation reflects what is actually happening. That's why understanding these tiny moments matters. Attraction is not always damaged by some huge argument or dramatic mistake. Sometimes distance begins through repeated signals that nobody consciously intended to bruise. And a hug that ends before connection has time to register can quietly tell him to emotionally step back. And once he begins protecting himself, you may notice him becoming less expressive, less confident, or less willing to move closer. You might then assume he has lost interest, causing you to withdraw even more. Suddenly, both people are responding to a misunderstanding created in a moment that lasted less than a second. The answer is not to perform, manipulate, or calculate every physical movement. It is simply to become aware of what your body may be communicating when your words are saying something entirely different. Because sometimes the strongest message a man receives from you is the one you never did consciously meant to send. So, because she genuinely likes him, she may retreat from the embrace quickly in an attempt to appear calm, independent, and completely unaffected. But there is a major problem with that approach. From the outside, emotional composure and lack of interest can look almost identical. He cannot see the nervous conversation happening inside your mind. You may believe you're wisely keeping your feelings under control, while he leaves thinking, "She's lovely, but I don't think she really feels anything for me." And you may never realize that this conclusion was formed. Now we come to the third mistake, and this may create the most subtle damage when it happens repeatedly. I call it the absent embrace. Your body participates, but your attention has already disappeared somewhere else. Perhaps you're rehearsing what you'll say after the hug. Maybe you're aware of other people watching. You could be worrying about your appearance, analyzing his reaction, or mentally questioning whether you're behaving correctly. The embrace physically happens, but emotionally, you're barely inside the experience. And men notice this in the same ordinary human way that you notice when another person isn't, might, if fully present with you. There is nothing mystical about it. When someone gives you their complete attention, even for 3 or 4 seconds, your body experiences that interaction differently. Compare it with someone mechanically completing a social gesture while their mind is elsewhere, and the contrast is immediate. We have all felt both. Sometimes we cannot logically describe the difference, but we know it when it happens. Women often tell me, "I was trapped in my thoughts that evening. I couldn't relax or behave naturally." Then they wonder why the connection seems slightly weaker afterward. What they don't realize is that he experienced part of that tension too. He felt the distance. Unfortunately, he may not interpret it as nervousness, anxiety, or a busy mind. Instead, the emotional message can become, "Well, she wasn't really interested in being here with me." Even when that conclusion is completely inaccurate, the feeling can remain. You may have spent the entire evening thinking about him, but if the physical moment felt empty or distracted, that is the information his body remembers. Over time, these impressions can quietly influence how safe or confident he feels moving toward you. The back pat, the instant withdrawal, and the mentally absent embrace happen every day between two people who may genuinely be attracted to each other. Real possibilities are sometimes weakened by signals neither person consciously intended to create, and because these moments seem so small, nobody ever traces the confusion back to its beginning. So now let's talk about the embrace that creates the opposite experience, the kind that can stay in his memory. And I want to be very clear about something. This is not about acting. It isn't a calculated dating trick or a physical routine you're supposed to memorize and perform on every man you meet. The entire point is to become fully present for several seconds and allow your body language to honestly reflect the warmth you already feel. That's it. When you understand it, the idea is incredibly simple. When you move toward him for a hug, move as though you have genuinely chosen to embrace him. You don't need to exaggerate the moment or turn it into a dramatic scene. Just be deliberate. Instead of approaching halfway and hesitantly waiting for the moment to finish, allow your whole body to participate naturally in the decision you've already made. Wrap your arms around him with enough warmth and gentle pressure that he can actually feel your presence. I'm not talking about squeezing him until the moment becomes uncomfortable. I mean giving the embrace enough substance that it emotionally registers. There is a meaningful difference between briefly making contact with someone and truly reaching them. And often the only difference is intention. But there is another detail that almost everyone overlooks, and it may have a greater effect than anything else I've described. Breathe. While you're holding him, allow yourself one slow, natural breath. The reason is simple. When you breathe normally, your body begins to release tension, and as your body softens, his nervous system can respond to that relaxation too. It sounds insignificant, because breathing is something we do constantly, but think about what happens when you're nervous. You tighten your muscles. Your breathing becomes shallow. Sometimes you unconsciously hold your breath while waiting for an interaction to end. During physical contact, another person can often feel that tension without understanding its source. If you're stiff, holding yourself tightly, and silently measuring how quickly you should move away, the entire embrace carries that energy. But when you allow yourself one genuine breath and simply remain in the moment, something changes. Your body communicates ease instead of urgency, and that ease often invites him to relax as well. Calmness can be surprisingly contagious during physical contact. That single breath may separate an embrace that feels like two people completing a polite ritual from one that feels like two people genuinely enjoying each other's closeness. Then comes the ending, and this is where many women unintentionally erase the warmth they just created. Don't escape from the hug. A common habit is to begin withdrawing emotionally and physically before the embrace has actually finished. Your shoulders are already moving backward, your attention has shifted, and your body seems halfway gone while you're technically still touching him. Instead, remain present for one small beat longer than your normal instinct might tell you to. This does not mean holding him until the situation becomes strange or uncomfortable. It simply means allowing the embrace to reach a natural conclusion rather than racing toward the exit. Give him enough time to become aware that the hug is ending. That tiny adjustment changes the emotional position you're occupying. Instead of being the woman who seemed eager to leave, you become the woman who remained fully present until the final second. When you eventually move backward, do it naturally and without sudden urgency. Let your hands gently release his back, shoulders, or arms, rather than snapping away as though your attention is immediately required somewhere more important. Remember, the ending of an interaction often becomes the final physical impression a person carries with them. So allow that ending to feel easy, relaxed, and unforced. And once you've stepped back, look at him for a moment. Really look at him. You don't need a carefully practiced smile or some seductive expression you rehearsed in a mirror. Simply meet his eyes with the natural warmth of someone who genuinely enjoyed the moment that just happened. If you truly like him, you don't have to manufacture that feeling. It's already there. You're simply allowing him to see it, instead of immediately hiding it behind nervousness or his self-protection. I've spoken with men who can describe tiny moments like these with astonishing clarity years after they happened. They remember embraces that probably lasted 4 or 5 seconds, yet something about those seconds remained emotionally vivid. When I ask them why, They often struggle to give me a sophisticated explanation. They say something simple like, "I can't explain it." For a moment, she made me feel as if nobody else existed. When you examine what actually happened, the pattern is usually remarkably similar. She was completely present. She didn't hurry through the closeness. She allowed the moment to feel genuine instead of immediately protecting herself from it. And when the embrace ended, she looked at him as though she was truly happy to be standing there with him. That's usually the entire secret. Because attraction is rarely created by the enormous cinematic moments people imagine. It isn't always the expensive surprise, the perfectly planned date, or some unforgettable speech. More often, attraction grows through tiny experiences of authentic connection that quietly accumulate. One meaningful moment rests on top of another until a person begins associating your presence with warmth, safety, and emotional aliveness. A genuine embrace can be incredibly powerful because it requires no clever words. You don't need a strategy, a script, or a game. For several seconds, two people simply stop performing and allow themselves to experience each other's presence. And consider how unusual that has become. We live surrounded by distraction. People are checking screens, planning their next sentence, wondering how they appear, and mentally living 3 moments ahead of the one currently happening. So when someone gives another human being their complete attention, even for 3 seconds, it can feel unexpectedly powerful. That is why the hug stays with him. It isn't because you executed some perfect technique. It's because for one brief moment, you were genuinely there. And in a world where so many people are only half present, full presence is something a man may remember far longer than you ever imagined. And that is exactly why these moments stay in someone's mind. But there is a deeper reason so many women hold themselves back. And it has very little to do with not knowing what to do. When a woman gives a quick hug, taps his back, or seems mentally somewhere else, it often isn't because she feels nothing. Sometimes it's the complete opposite. She is afraid of revealing too much. Afraid he'll sense how much she likes him. Afraid that being genuinely affectionate will make her appear desperate, overly available, or too easy to understand. That fear makes sense when you consider the advice women have heard for years. Stay mysterious. Hide your feelings. Don't show your cards, and make him chase. So she meets a man she genuinely wants, embraces him, then immediately controls herself. She pulls away before the moment naturally ends. She adds the friendly back pat to make the closeness feel safer. Then later she wonders why the connection doesn't seem to deepen. But warmth is not desperation. There is something deeply attractive about a woman who feels secure enough to be fully present. She can stand close without turning the moment into a calculation. She isn't observing herself from the outside, wondering whether she looks too interested. She simply allows herself to be there. This is often what men mean when they describe someone as magnetic. They rarely analyze a specific technique. They'll simply say, "I can't explain it. Being around her just felt natural." That is presence. I've seen intelligent, beautiful, fascinating women struggle with connection because during the moments that mattered most, they disappeared into their own thoughts. The hug was rushed. The smile was polite. Their eyes were distracted. Men described them as lovely, but difficult to connect with. The problem wasn't appearance or conversation. Emotionally, the man couldn't quite feel them. The women who changed this didn't memorize complicated dating tricks. They stopped treating every interaction like an exam they might fail. They allowed themselves to be warm without immediately retreating from that warmth. And men's responses changed dramatically because for the first time, their presence could actually be felt. When you stop monitoring every movement, your body already understands genuine connection. You know the difference between an embrace that feels sincere and one that feels empty. You don't need to manufacture warmth. You simply need to stop interrupting it with fear. So remember this the next time you see him. Before you hug him, quietly choose to be completely there. Let your arms genuinely hold him. Take one calm breath and settle into the moment. Don't rush the ending, and when you separate, give him one real look. That's all. These aren't 4 clever tricks. They are 4 expressions of one decision, showing up instead of emotionally watching from a distance. Those few seconds may become what he remembers most. Not your outfit, not the exact words you used. He remembers how present you felt. And repeated moments of presence begin to build something powerful. Eventually, he doesn't simply think you're attractive or interesting. He starts thinking about you when you're gone. He anticipates seeing you because being with you feels easy, genuine, and emotionally alive. Relationship Truth, Matthew Hussey, wants you to understand that connection is often created in the quiet moments people overlook. A look held slightly longer, a touch that doesn't immediately disappear, a hug where someone can genuinely feel you are there. These are the moments people replay later. You don't have to become someone else or master a complicated strategy. Stop shrinking precisely when connection is asking you to remain present. Stop pulling away because you're afraid warmth will expose you. The connection you've been searching for may already be available, but you have to allow yourself to experience it instead of constantly evaluating yourself. Start with something as simple as the way you say hello. If you've recognized yourself as the woman who pats, rushes, or mentally checks out during a hug, tell me in the comments which one you've been doing. Share this with a friend who needs the reminder, and subscribe to Relationship Truth, Matthew Hussey, for more practical relationship advice. Until next time, stop watching the moment from the outside. Be there. You already know how. Sometimes you simply need to remember.